On June 25, 2024, Kenya's young people crossed a line the political class never thought they would cross. They had started with phones, screens, hashtags, TikToks, X Spaces, shared PDFs, threads explaining tax clauses most politicians assumed no one would read. They turned a finance bill into a national lesson. They translated legal language into street language. They made memes out of power. They named the MPs. They tracked votes. They shamed luxury. They turned the internet into a civic classroom and then into a march. Then they reached Parliament. Police fired. Tear gas moved through the streets. Live rounds cracked through the air. Protesters pushed past barriers. Part of the building burned. Lawmakers fled through tunnels. Videos spread faster than official statements could contain them. Kenya watched a generation that had been mocked as online, soft, distracted, and apolitical force its way into the physical heart of the state. That was the moment the story went global. But the viral version was too simple. Young people angry about taxes stormed Parliament. The deeper story was older, heavier, and more dangerous. It was about debt. It was about corruption. It was about a government asking the poor and working class to pay more while politicians lived loudly. It was about the International Monetary Fund, the cost of living, police violence, unemployment, betrayal, and a generation raised online but trapped in an economy that could not absorb them. And it was about Kenya itself, a country celebrated as an anchor of East Africa, a technology hub, a diplomatic partner, a regional power, a democracy with problems but not a failed state. Then suddenly, on one afternoon in Nairobi, the image cracked. The tax bill did not create the anger. It gave the anger a target. And once Gen Z found the target, the country changed. The Kenya protests went viral because they had a structure the internet understands instantly. Young people versus a disconnected government. Taxes versus survival. Parliament versus the street. Tear gas versus smartphones. A president who had promised hustlers a better life, now defending a bill that made life more expensive. A protest movement that did not begin in party headquarters, did not wait for old opposition leaders, and did not speak in the cautious language of civil society reports. It spoke like the internet, direct, funny, angry, humiliating, fearless. That is why the story traveled. Viewers did not need to know Kenyan budget law to understand the central image. A generation was being told to pay for a country it did not believe had been built for them. The viral videos had a rhythm. First, the shock. Protesters stormed Parliament. Then, the question, why were they so angry? Then, the reversal. This was not just about taxes. Then, the deeper hook. This was about a generation that had lost patience with debt, corruption, unemployment, and police violence. Then, the emotional anchor. People died, and families still want justice. A strong documentary script must follow that rhythm. It cannot begin as a lecture. It must begin with the fire, the breach, the panic, and the disbelief. Only after the viewer is inside the moment can the story move backward. Colonial Kenya, land and power, independence elites, debt, structural adjustment, corruption scandals, youth unemployment, social media politics, William Ruto's rise, the finance bill, and the anniversary protest that proved the wound was still open. The best title is not only about Kenya. It is about a modern political pattern. When a generation reads the bill, names the thieves, records the violence, and refuses to wait for permission. That is the hook. The tax bill was paper. The revolt was fire. The Finance Bill 2024 was presented by the government as a budget necessity. Kenya needed revenue. Debt had to be serviced. Development promises had to be funded. The state could not run on outrage, officials argued. It needed taxes. But ordinary Kenyans heard something else. They heard bread, fuel, mobile money, salaries, small businesses, housing, transport, everyday life. They heard a government reaching into pockets already emptied by inflation and unemployment. They heard technocratic language being used to describe pain. And they heard that pain coming from leaders whose lifestyles seemed insulated from sacrifice. A tax bill can be dry when people trust the state. It becomes explosive when they do not. In Kenya, distrust was already deep. Citizens saw corruption scandals, expensive cars, foreign trips, political appointments, inflated projects, and a ruling class that seemed to ask for discipline from everyone except itself. The finance bill landed in that atmosphere like a match. The protests began with close reading. That is one of the most important parts of the story. Young Kenyans did not only shout against the bill. They studied it. They explained clauses in videos. They circulated summaries. They made spreadsheets. They created simple graphics. They called MPs. They posted phone numbers. They turned civic education into content. This was not ignorance. It was literacy weaponized. The state had expected fatigue. Instead, it got translation. And once a generation translated the bill into ordinary life, the argument left parliament and entered the streets. Kenya's Gen Z revolt did not emerge from nowhere. It came from a generation that had been told to hustle, adapt, learn skills, build brands, start businesses, use technology, and stop waiting for the state. They did all of that. They became digital workers, creators, coders, writers, sellers, students, freelancers, graduates, designers, activists, and informal entrepreneurs. But the economy did not reward them at the scale promised. Many were educated but underemployed, connected but broke, politically aware but institutionally excluded. They lived inside a strange contradiction, more exposed to the world than any generation before them, but often unable to build a secure life in their own country. They knew what politicians said in public and what lifestyles those politicians displayed online. They could compare promises with budgets. They could fact-check speeches in real time. They could mock power before power had finished speaking. This is why the older political class misread them. It thought youth meant noise without endurance. It thought memes were not organization. It thought online anger would stay online. It thought protests required party machines, ethnic mobilization, or opposition bosses. But Gen Z had a different infrastructure. WhatsApp groups, TikTok explainers, X Spaces, Instagram slides, M-Pesa fundraising, live streams, Google Docs, and shared rage. They did not wait for permission from Raila Odinga. They did not organize around one ethnic bloc. They did not ask the church, unions, or NGOs to lead. They said they were leaderless, but leaderless did not mean structureless. It meant the structure was distributed, and that made it harder to buy, arrest, negotiate with, or silence. To understand why the protest felt so explosive, the story has to go backward. Kenya's modern politics carries the weight of colonial land theft, racial hierarchy, forced labor, emergency rule, and a violent independent struggle. British colonial rule did not only govern Kenya. It reorganized land and power. White settlers occupied fertile areas. African communities were displaced, taxed, controlled, and forced into labor systems. The state developed as a tool of extraction and discipline. The Mau Mau uprising and the British response left deep scars. Detention camps, torture, executions, village controls, and collective punishment shaped the end of colonial rule. Kenya gained independence in 1963, but independence did not automatically dismantle the structures of inequality. Land remained central. The state remained powerful. Security forces remained feared. Elites inherited institutions built to command, not to serve. That matters because when Kenyan police confront protesters, the scene is not historically empty. The post-colonial state inherited many habits from the colonial one: suspicion of dissent, use of force, intelligence surveillance, emergency logic, and the idea that order is more important than accountability. Governments changed. The coercive instinct survived. The Gen Z protesters were not always speaking in old ideological language. Many were speaking in memes, slang, music, and direct anger. But the state they confronted carried older DNA. Parliament may be democratic. Elections may be regular. Kenya may have courts, media, and civil society. But beneath the constitutional surface sits a long history of power responding to crowds as threats. That is why the finance bill became more than fiscal policy. It became a confrontation with the state itself. Kenya's post-independence politics was shaped by a bargain among elites. Jomo Kenyatta became the founding president, and the new state inherited the machinery of colonial administration. Land became the central unresolved question. Some land was redistributed. Some was bought through settlement schemes. Some remained tied to new elites. The promise of liberation did not become full economic justice for all. This is where the story of betrayal begins. Independence brought flags, an anthem, African leadership, and national pride. But many ordinary Kenyans still faced poverty, landlessness, and exclusion. The state became a ladder for some and a wall for others. Politics became tied to patronage: who gets land, jobs, roads, licenses, contracts, protection, and access. Ethnicity also became a major language of political competition. Leaders mobilized communities by promising benefits and warning of exclusion. Elections became high stakes because control of the state meant control of resources. This pattern did not begin with Ruto. It belongs to the long architecture of Kenyan power. Gen Z challenged that architecture in a new way. The 2024 protests were striking because many young people rejected the ethnic scripts that usually organize Kenyan politics. They were not mobilizing as Kikuyu, Luo, Kalenjin, Luhya, Kamba, Somali, or any other bloc. They were mobilizing as taxpayers, unemployed graduates, workers, daughters, sons, and citizens. They mocked the ethnic arithmetic of the old parties. They said the bill would hurt everyone. That was terrifying to the political class. A Kenya that argues as citizens is harder to divide than a Kenya that votes as tribes. Daniel Arap Moi's long rule entrenched a culture of presidential power, surveillance, patronage, and fear. Kenya under Moi was not the same as the colonial state, but the authoritarian habits remained strong. Opposition was controlled. Dissent was punished. The security apparatus mattered. The presidency sat at the center of national life. For many Kenyans, the Moi era created a political memory. Be careful what you say, be careful where you gather, be careful who is watching. That memory did not disappear with multi-party politics. It lived inside families, universities, newsrooms, police stations, and courtrooms. Even when Kenya democratized, fear remained part of the political inheritance. The Gen Z revolt was powerful partly because it seemed to reject fear itself. Young protesters filmed police. They mocked officials. They posted names and faces. They spoke in a tone older generations found shocking. Not because older generations lacked courage, but because they had lived through a state that punished courage heavily. Gen Z inherited the fear, but refused to perform it. The phrase, "we are not our parents," carried political force. It did not mean parents were cowards. It meant the children understood the old fear and were tired of paying rent to it. This is why police violence did not immediately end the protests. It made them more serious. It showed the young that the state still possessed the old reflex. It also showed the state that a new generation was less willing to be disciplined by that reflex. That is when protest becomes revolt. The finance bill was about taxes, but the deeper force behind it was debt. Kenya, like many countries, had borrowed heavily for infrastructure, development, budget support, and political ambition. Roads, railways, energy projects, and state programs required money. Some borrowing funded real needs. Some became tied to waste, corruption, inflated contracts, and questionable priorities. Debt is often invisible until the bill comes due. Citizens may see the road, the train, the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the campaign promise. They do not always see repayment schedules, interest rates, currency risk, or budget pressure. Then suddenly the state says it needs more revenue. Taxes rise. Fees increase. Subsidies shrink. Public services remain weak. People are told to sacrifice for obligations they did not negotiate and benefits they did not fully receive. That was the anger in Kenya. Young people were not only rejecting taxes. They were asking why they should pay for debts linked to elite decisions, corruption, and prestige projects. They were asking why the ordinary citizen must become the ATM of a political class that never seems to run out of money for itself. Debt turns the future into a creditor. It means tomorrow's income is already partly claimed. For a young generation trying to build lives, that is suffocating. They inherit not only unemployment, but repayment. Not only corruption, but the invoice for corruption. The finance bill made debt visible. And once it became visible, the crowd understood that the tax debate was really a debate over who pays for the state's past. The International Monetary Fund became part of the protest story because many Kenyans associated tax hikes with external pressure. The government needed revenue. Debt had to be managed. Fiscal consolidation was presented as responsibility. But to protesters, the language sounded familiar. Ordinary people must tighten belts so that creditors and elites can be reassured. This is a recurring pattern across the global south. Governments borrow. Debt rises. International lenders push for reforms, revenue collection, subsidy cuts, and fiscal discipline. Officials described these measures as necessary. Citizens experienced them as higher prices, new taxes, and reduced relief. Anger turns not only against local leaders, but against the global financial system that appears to demand sacrifice from people least able to afford it. The IMF is not the only actor in Kenya's debt story, and blaming everything on it would be too simple. Domestic choices matter. Corruption matters. Political spending matters. Infrastructure priorities matter. But the IMF became a symbol because it represents a wider question. Who really writes the budget in a debt-stressed country? When Gen Z protested, they were not only speaking to parliament. They were speaking to a global order in which African governments are often told to be disciplined after elites have already wasted money. They were asking why fiscal responsibility always seems to begin with taxing the poor, not recovering stolen wealth. That is why Reject Finance Bill became more than a slogan. It became a refusal to be governed by spreadsheets that ignore lived pain. William Ruto rose to the presidency by presenting himself as the champion of the hustler. He spoke to boda riders, market traders, small business owners, churchgoers, farmers, unemployed youth, and people who felt locked out of elite dynasties. His political brand was built around the bottom-up economy, the idea that Kenya's ordinary strivers deserved support, credit, dignity, and attention. That promise made the finance bill feel like betrayal. The same leader who had spoken to hustlers now appeared to be taxing them harder. The same government that spoke of empowerment now demanded more from people already struggling with rent, transport, food, school fees, and unstable income. The gap between campaign language and budget reality became politically explosive. Ruto's defenders argued that he inherited a difficult fiscal situation and had to make hard choices. They said Kenya needed revenue, debt discipline, and development financing. But politics is not only about accounting. It is also about trust. When people do not trust how money is spent, they resist giving more. When they see leaders living comfortably, austerity sounds like insult. The Gen Z protests attacked this gap directly. They did not treat Ruto as a distant father of the nation. They treated him as a politician who had made promises and now had to answer. They used the internet to replay old statements against new policies. They turned campaign memory into evidence. The hustler president had awakened the hustlers. Then they came for the bill. Corruption was one of the central emotional engines of the revolt. Not only corruption as legal accusation, but corruption as public display. Kenyans saw politicians wearing expensive watches, driving luxury cars, flying abroad, building mansions, and speaking about sacrifice from positions of comfort. Social media made elite lifestyles harder to hide and easier to mock. That mattered. In earlier eras, wealth could be displayed locally and explained through patronage. In the digital era, every image becomes evidence. A politician's watch can become a budget argument. A convoy can become a tax protest. A foreign trip can become a meme. Gen Z understood the power of visual contradiction. If you say the country is broke, why do you look so rich? The revolt was therefore aesthetic as well as political. It attacked the style of power, the arrogance, the distance, the language, the laughter in parliament, the speeches that sounded like scolding, the sense that leaders had forgotten what ordinary life costs. Corruption scandals alone do not always produce revolt. People can become numb. What made 2024 different was the combination of corruption fatigue and tax pressure. Citizens were not only hearing that money was being stolen, they were being asked to replace it. The state said, "Pay more." The youth answered, "Show us where the money went." That question was more dangerous than any slogan. The Gen Z protests were not leaderless in the sense of being chaotic. They were networked. Leadership moved through accounts, spaces, posters, influencers, anonymous organizers, legal volunteers, medics, coders, artists, and ordinary citizens who shared what needed to be shared. One person made a poster. Another translated a clause. Another raised bail money. Another mapped police movement. Another live-streamed. Another wrote a chant. Another exposed an MP's vote. This distributed structure made the movement fast. It also made it resilient. The state could arrest visible figures, but the information kept moving. If one space closed, another opened. If one poster was blocked, another circulated. If politicians dismissed protesters as ignorant, the protesters replied with documents. Digital organizing also changed the emotional experience of protest. People who had never attended a demonstration could watch live, donate, share emergency numbers, identify missing people, or follow events minute by minute. The protest became a national feed. Fear and courage traveled together. But digital movements have limits. They can mobilize quickly, but sustaining organization after the peak is harder. They can reject old leaders, but eventually decisions must be made. They can expose power, but replacing power requires structures. The Kenyan Gen Z revolt was brilliant at mobilization. Its long-term political challenge is institution building. Still, the lesson was clear. The state had a police force. The youth had a network. Leaderless movements are powerful because they are difficult to co-opt. There is no single office to raid, no single politician to buy, no single negotiator to isolate, no single mouth to silence. The Kenyan Gen Z movement used this as strength. It refused to let old opposition figures claim ownership. It rejected ethnic brokers. It said the protest belonged to citizens. But leaderless movements face a dilemma. If the state wants to negotiate, who speaks? If demands expand, who prioritizes? If violence erupts, who controls discipline? If infiltrators appear, who identifies them? If the government offers concessions, who decides whether they are enough? If the movement needs to contest elections, who builds the vehicle? This dilemma does not erase the movement's power. It defines its next stage. Many successful protest waves face the same question. How does a moment become an organization without losing its soul? How does rage become strategy? How does a hashtag become policy? How does a generation remain broad enough to include many voices but focused enough to win? Kenya's Gen Z revolt did not need a single leader to shake the state. But to transform the state, it may need new forms of leadership, transparent, accountable, horizontal where possible, structured where necessary. That is the hard part. Burning fear is faster than building power. The protests became impossible to treat as ordinary politics once people were killed. Police violence changed the emotional meaning of the movement. The finance bill had been the spark, but the deaths became the wound. Families lost sons and daughters. Videos circulated. Names were remembered. Survivors described bullets, beatings, abductions, and fear. Rights groups demanded accountability. The state often speaks of order in moments like this. It says protests were infiltrated. It says property was destroyed. It says security forces faced danger. Some of that may be true in specific places, but none of it answers the central question families ask: who fired, who ordered, who covered it up, and who will be held responsible? This is why anniversaries matter. June 25th became not only a date of protest, but a date of mourning. Flowers, candles, marches, roadblocks, and police warnings all became part of memory. The government may want to move on. Families do not move on because the calendar says so. Police violence can sometimes crush a movement. It can also sanctify it. Once blood is spilled, the state no longer debates only policy. It debates legitimacy. The dead become witnesses against official language. Every future speech about dialogue is heard beside the memory of bullets. That is why the anniversary protests in 2026 mattered. They proved the bill was gone, but the wound remained. The storming of Parliament was the image that defined the uprising. It was shocking because Parliament is supposed to be the protected center of representative democracy. It is where laws are debated, budgets passed, and the peoples will translate it into state power. When protesters breached it, they were not only entering a building, they were accusing the building of betrayal. For supporters, the breach was the moment the people confronted a political class that had stopped listening. For critics, it was a dangerous attack on institutions. Both readings mattered. The storming revealed the depth of anger, but it also raised the stakes. Once the legislature is breached and part of it burns, the state can frame protest as insurrection. The movement can frame the state as illegitimate. The middle ground collapses quickly. Images from that day traveled because they condensed the entire crisis. Parliament burning said more than 1,000 policy papers. It said the relationship between citizens and representatives had broken. It said the people outside no longer believed the people inside were acting for them. It said the bill had become a symbol of a system. The viral power of the scene came from its simplicity. The rulers passed the bill. The youth came to the door. Then the door did not hold. After the violence and national outrage, President Ruto withdrew the finance bill. On paper, the protesters had won. The government retreated from the legislation that had triggered the uprising. In many movements, that would be the end of the story. But it was not. Because once people had died, withdrawal was not enough. Once Parliament had burned, the issue was no longer only clauses and tax rates. Once a generation had discovered its collective power, the demands expanded. Protesters wanted accountability for killings. They wanted corruption addressed. They wanted officials resigning. They wanted a government that listened before bloodshed, not after. This is a common pattern in revolts. The trigger can be removed, but the movement has already learned that the trigger was part of a larger machine. A fare increase becomes a revolt against inequality. A bread price becomes a revolt against dictatorship. A tax bill becomes a revolt against corruption, debt, police violence, and elite contempt. Ruto's retreat was significant. It showed the government could be forced back, but it also exposed the fragility of his authority. He had tried to defend the bill as necessary. Then he withdrew it under pressure. To supporters, that could look responsive. To opponents, it looked like proof that the bill should never have passed. The youth learned something that day. The state could bend. After the bill was withdrawn, the protest movement did not simply disappear. Its energy shifted. The anger moved from one piece of legislation to a larger critique of government. Kenyans asked why hospitals lacked supplies, why schools struggled, why jobs were scarce, why corruption scandals went unresolved, why politicians lived extravagantly, why police killed citizens, why debt kept rising, and why every solution seemed to demand sacrifice from ordinary people. This expansion frightened the state more than the original tax protest. A government can withdraw a bill. It cannot easily withdraw the conditions that made people furious. It cannot repeal unemployment in one speech. It cannot cancel debt without consequences. It cannot erase videos of police violence. It cannot rebuild trust with a press conference. That is why the movement mattered even after its immediate victory. It changed what many young people believed was possible. It made politics feel accessible. It showed that a bill could be read, challenged, and defeated. It made old politicians look slower. It gave citizens a sense that power could be interrupted. Whether that becomes long-term change is another question. Movements can fade. Governments can wait them out. Repression can intensify. Internal divisions can grow. But even if the movement changes form, the memory remains. A generation saw the state blink. That memory is hard to govern. After the protests, reports of abductions, disappearances, arrests, intimidation, and threats created another layer of fear. Activists, influencers, and government critics said they were targeted. Families searched for missing loved ones. Civil society groups demanded answers. The state denied or deflected some accusations while insisting it was maintaining order. Abduction is one of the most terrifying forms of state-linked power because it attacks certainty. An arrest has a paper trail, a court date, a charge. An abduction creates fog. Is the person alive? Who took them? Where are they? What will happen if others speak? The uncertainty becomes part of the punishment. For a digital generation, this fear collided with visibility. People posted missing persons alerts. They used online pressure to force attention. They named vehicles, locations, officers, and timelines where possible. The same network that mobilized protest became a network of alarm. The abduction fear also revealed the state's dilemma. To crush the movement too openly risked more outrage. To intimidate quietly risked deepening the image of a government afraid of its own youth. Either way, the promise of dialogue rang hollow if critics vanished. This is where democracy is tested hardest, not when citizens praise leaders, but when citizens insult them, expose them, and demand they leave. A state that answers criticism with disappearance is not strong. It is afraid. On June 25, 2026, Kenyans marched again under heavy security to mark the second anniversary of the deadly 2024 protests. The anniversary was not only a commemoration, it was a test of memory. Would the state allow mourning? Would the families be heard? Would the dead be reduced to statistics? Would the movement still have force 2 years later? The government prepared for unrest. Police set roadblocks. Businesses shut. Warnings were issued. Families, survivors, opposition figures, activists, and citizens gathered to remember those killed. The state spoke of order. The protesters spoke of justice. The same contradiction returned. One side feared chaos, the other feared forgetting. Anniversaries matter because power often depends on time. Governments hope outrage will fade. Citizens return to work. News cycles move on. New scandals replace old ones. But anniversaries resist that erosion. They say, this happened. These people died. The wound is still here. The bill may be gone, but the blood is not. For Kenya's Gen Z revolt, the second anniversary proved the story was not over. A protest can be dispersed. A bill can be withdrawn. A hashtag can fall from trending lists. But memory can organize quietly until the date returns. June 25th became a national question. What did the state learn? And what did it refuse to confess? Government compensation for victims of police brutality became part of the anniversary debate. Money can matter to families. It can help with burial costs, medical bills, lost income, and survival. But compensation without accountability can feel like an attempt to buy silence. Families do not only want money. They want names, prosecutions, apology, and truth. This distinction is crucial. A government may announce funds and call it justice. Families may hear an admission without responsibility. Who ordered the crackdown? Which officers fired live rounds? Which commanders authorized force? Which institutions covered up abuses? Who lied? Who will be removed from office? Without answers, compensation can become another performance. The demand for accountability transforms the protest from economics into human rights. A tax bill can be withdrawn by executive decision. Police violence requires investigation, prosecution, and institutional reform. That is much harder. It threatens the security apparatus. It threatens commanders. It threatens political leaders who rely on police power. This is why states prefer compensation to accountability. Compensation is controlled. Accountability is dangerous. The families of June 25th understood that difference. They were not only asking to be paid. They were asking the state to admit what it had done. Kenya is not a marginal country. It is one of Africa's major diplomatic, economic, and security hubs. Nairobi hosts international organizations, technology companies, regional offices, embassies, media bureaus, and NGOs. Kenya plays important roles in East African politics, counterterrorism cooperation, climate diplomacy, and regional mediation. That is why instability there matters beyond its borders. The Gen Z revolt challenged the polished global image of Kenya as stable, modern, entrepreneurial, and investor-friendly. It did not destroy that image, but it complicated it. The same country marketed as Silicon Savannah produced a youth movement that used digital tools to accuse the state of betrayal. The same country praised for innovation showed how innovation can organize dissent. The same government that sought international confidence faced domestic revolt over the costs of pleasing creditors. This global position also shaped how the government responded. Kenya's leaders had to reassure investors, lenders, diplomats, and citizens at the same time. That is difficult when the crowd is saying the economic model itself is unfair. The protests showed a wider truth about modern African states integrated into global finance. They must speak one language to creditors and another to citizens. The finance bill became the place where those languages collided. The outside world asked whether Kenya was stable. The youth asked stable for whom? The protests showed that social media can become a civic classroom. Young Kenyans use TikTok, X, Instagram, and WhatsApp not only to vent but to teach. They explained the bill, broke down tax proposals, identified MPs, shared protest routes, published safety advice, raised legal funds, and documented violence. Political education became participatory and fast. This matters because governments often rely on complexity. Budget documents are long. Legal language is technical. Parliamentary procedure is boring. Complexity protects power because many citizens do not have time to translate it. Gen Z attacked that barrier. They made the bill legible. Once citizens understand a law, they can oppose it more precisely. They can call representatives. They can ask targeted questions. They can expose contradictions. They can refuse vague reassurance. That is what made the movement dangerous. It was not only emotional. It was informed. Of course, social media also carries risks. Misinformation, rumor, outrage cycles, manipulation, surveillance, and shallow analysis. But in this case, the digital sphere opened a political space that formal institutions had failed to provide. The classroom moved from parliament to the phone, and the exam was in the streets. Kenya's Gen Z movement used humor with devastating effect. Memes, jokes, nicknames, edits, and sarcastic posts turned politicians into objects of ridicule. This matters because authoritarian and arrogant power depends on distance. It wants to be feared, respected, and surrounded by ceremony. Humor collapses that distance. A meme can do what a policy paper cannot. It can make a leader look small. It can travel quickly. It can enter conversations that formal activism does not reach. It can make politics feel less intimidating. It can turn private anger into public laughter. And laughter, in a tense political moment, can become courage. Humor also helped the movement resist ethnic division. Instead of old speeches about tribal blocks, young people shared jokes about taxes, MPs, lifestyle, police, and the absurdity of elite behavior. The shared comedic language created a national youth culture of dissent. People who might never attend the same party rally could laugh at the same clip. But humor did not mean the movement was unserious. That was one of the older generation's mistakes. They confused jokes with weakness. In reality, humor was part of the organizing technology. It lowered fear, increased reach, and made power easier to confront. The state had batons. The youth had punchlines. Sometimes punchlines travel farther. Kenya has a long history of churches, civil society organizations, lawyers, journalists, unions, and human rights groups challenging state power. These institutions mattered before Gen Z and still matter now. But the 2024 revolt showed that a new protest wave did not necessarily wait for them to lead. This created a generational shift. Older institutions could support, document, provide legal aid, investigate abuses, and amplify demands. But they could not fully own the movement. That was part of its power. Gen Z respected help, but resisted capture. They were suspicious of anyone who looked like they might negotiate away the anger. Civil society played an important role in tracking arrests, demanding release of protesters, documenting police violence, and providing legal frameworks. But the moral energy came from the streets and screens. The movement had a different tone from NGO language. It was less polished, less donor-friendly, less careful. That made it unpredictable and authentic. The challenge after the peak is whether the energy of Gen Z can connect with the durability of older institutions without being domesticated by them. Movements need lawyers, documentation, funding, political strategy, and long memory. Institutions need youthful legitimacy and urgency. If those forces cooperate, the revolt can mature. If they mistrust each other completely, the state can wait. Kenya's established opposition faced an awkward moment in the Gen Z protests. For years, opposition leaders had mobilized against governments through rallies, coalitions, ethnic alliances, and negotiations. But in 2024, a new movement emerged that did not want to be a vehicle for old politicians. Many young protesters did not trust the ruling party or the opposition. They saw both as part of a political class that had benefited from the same system. This was a major break. The protest was anti-government, but not automatically pro-opposition. It was anti-tax, anti-corruption, anti-elite, anti-police violence, and anti-betrayal. It rejected the idea that change required lining up behind familiar figures. That made the movement more difficult to contain. Old opposition leaders still had platforms, experience, and supporters. They could amplify demands and challenge the government in formal politics. But if they tried to claim ownership, they risked backlash. Gen Z had already named the problem. Leaders who appeared during crisis to harvest energy rather than build accountability. This tension will shape Kenya's future. A movement can shake power from outside, but formal political change usually requires elections, parties, candidates, and institutions. If Gen Z refuses all old vehicles, it must build new ones. If it enters old vehicles, it risks being absorbed. That is the political trap after revolt. You can reject the old politics, but then you must invent something else. The revolt was not only generational. It was class-based in a broad and modern sense. Young professionals, students, informal workers, digital freelancers, boda riders, small traders, unemployed graduates, and urban workers all felt the squeeze differently, but they recognized a shared pressure. Life was too expensive, work too insecure, and the state too demanding. Cost of living politics can be more explosive than ideology because it enters every home. Food prices, rent, school fees, transport, phone data, fuel, and medical bills are not abstract. They shape daily dignity. When the government asks for more taxes, people calculate immediately. What disappears from my life if this passes? This is why the bill's details mattered. Each tax proposal became a household argument. The protest was not simply against the idea of taxation. It was against being taxed by a state many believed wasted money and protected elites. People may accept taxes when they see services. They revolt when taxes feel like tribute. The class anger was sharpened by visibility. Social media made inequality impossible to ignore. Politicians' lifestyles circulated beside citizens' bills. Austerity for the public and luxury for leaders became the image of injustice. The movement's class message was simple: do not ask empty pockets to fund full pockets. Kenyan politics has often been organized through ethnicity, not because Kenyans are inherently tribal, but because the state has historically distributed power and resources through ethnic patronage networks. Politicians mobilize communities by promising protection and access. Elections become moments of fear and bargaining. Ethnic identity becomes political currency. The Gen Z protests disrupted that pattern. Protesters deliberately emphasized national citizenship over ethnic loyalty. They mocked attempts to frame the movement through tribal categories. They shared a language of common suffering: taxes, debt, unemployment, corruption, police violence. The bill did not check your surname before raising your costs. That became a political lesson. This refusal to divide was one of the movement's most radical features. It threatened the old machinery of Kenyan politics. If young people vote, protest, and organize across ethnic lines around class and accountability, the traditional brokers lose power. The state can no longer rely as easily on dividing anger into manageable blocks. Of course, ethnic politics does not disappear because of one protest wave. It is deeply rooted in institutions, history, land, parties, and local interests. But the 2024 revolt showed a different possibility. A generation connected through digital culture and shared economic pain can sometimes step around the old scripts. That possibility is why the movement frightened more than one party. It was not only anti-government. It was anti-playbook. The world watched Kenya's protests with fascination and discomfort. Western governments saw a key partner under pressure. Investors saw political risk. Human rights groups saw police violence. African youth across the continent saw a model. Governments elsewhere saw a warning. The images from Nairobi traveled because they spoke to a wider age of frustration. Young people facing debt, austerity, corruption, and leaders who seem insulated from ordinary life. Kenya's revolt resonated beyond Africa because the underlying story is global. A generation comes of age in a world of high costs, insecure work, digital exposure, and declining trust in institutions. Governments ask them to pay more. They ask what they are paying for. The answer is often unsatisfying. The global audience also mattered because it constrained the Kenyan state. In the smartphone era, repression travels quickly. A shooting can become international evidence. A missing activist can become a diplomatic issue. A police line can become a symbol. That does not stop violence, but it changes the cost. At the same time, international attention can simplify the story. Foreign viewers may romanticize Gen Z, flatten Kenyan politics, or treat the protests as content. A responsible documentary has to avoid that. The movement was inspiring, but it was also painful, messy, dangerous, and unfinished. Viral attention is not solidarity by itself. It is only the beginning of attention. The Kenyan government learned that youth anger could not be dismissed as online noise. It learned that a finance bill could become a national uprising. It learned that old methods of political containment were weaker against networked protest. It learned that parliament could be physically breached. It learned that police force could create martyrs. It learned that withdrawing a bill might not be enough. But what did it really learn? That is the unresolved question. A government can learn to listen, or it can learn to repress more efficiently. It can open dialogue, or it can improve surveillance. It can address corruption, or it can manage optics. It can reform police, or it can compensate victims while protecting commanders. It can change policy, or it can change tactics. The anniversary protests suggest that many Kenyans do not believe enough has changed. Roadblocks, warnings, and security deployments send a message. The state remembers June 25th as a threat. Families remember it as a wound. Protesters remember it as proof of power. Politicians remember it as a warning. These memories compete. The future depends on which memory becomes policy. If the government remembers only the fear of losing control, the next confrontation may be worse. If it remembers why people came out, Kenya may still have a chance to transform anger into reform. Gen Z learned that the state can be forced to retreat. That is a dangerous and empowering lesson. Before 2024, many young Kenyans believed politics was something done by older men in parties, ethnic coalitions, churches, and parliament. After 2024, politics also meant a phone, a poster, a march, a live stream, a spreadsheet, a legal fund, and a crowd that refuses to go home. They also learned the cost. Protest is not a meme when bullets are fired. Courage is not aesthetic when bodies fall. Leaderless organization is exciting until families need answers, lawyers need names, and the movement must decide what comes next. Gen Z learned that the state can bleed. It also learned that the state can make citizens bleed. This dual lesson is the heart of the movement's future. If young people remember only victory, they may underestimate the next stage. If they remember only trauma, fear may return. The movement must hold both. We forced change, and people died. That memory can mature into disciplined civic power. It can also become bitterness, fragmentation, or despair. The next phase depends on organization, political education, ethical leadership, and the ability to connect protest energy to long-term accountability. A generation found its voice. Now it must decide what to build with it. The future of Kenya's Gen Z revolt will not be measured only by street protests. It will be measured by budgets, elections, court cases, police reform, civic education, local organizing, new candidates, public spending, and whether young people stay engaged after the adrenaline fades. A movement can win a moment and lose the decade if it does not build institutions. But institutions can also kill movements if they absorb them too quickly. The challenge is to create forms of power that are flexible enough to keep the movement's spirit and strong enough to survive repression, elections, and fatigue. Kenya's youth may build civic platforms, watchdog networks, legal defense funds, independent media, political parties, local accountability groups, or issue-based campaigns. They may reshape existing parties by entering them. They may refuse party politics and focus on pressure from outside. Each path has risks. What is certain is that the 2024 protest changed the political imagination. Every future finance bill will be read differently. Every MP vote may be tracked. Every display of wealth may be mocked. Every police action may be filmed. Every anniversary may revive memory. The state can still govern, but it can no longer assume the youth are not watching. The ending should return to parliament, but not as spectacle. It should return as a question. A building can be repaired. Burn marks can be painted over. Glass can be replaced. MPs can return to their seats. A president can withdraw a bill. Police can reopen roads. News cycles can move on. But something changed on June 25, 2024 that cannot be repaired like a wall. A generation crossed from complaint into power. It learned that the state is not sacred when it betrays the people. It learned that budgets are moral documents. It learned that corruption is not an abstraction when taxes rise. It learned that police violence is not a footnote when families bury children. It learned that the internet can become a parliament before parliament listens. Kenya's Gen Z revolt was not perfect. No revolt is. It was chaotic, brave, angry, funny, informed, wounded, leaderless, and unfinished. But it forced a country to see its young people not as future citizens, but as citizens now. The tax bill set the country on fire because the country was already dry. Debt had dried it. Corruption had dried it. Unemployment had dried it. Police violence had dried it. Elite arrogance had dried it. Gen Z brought the spark. And once the fire began, Kenya discovered that the young people it had told to hustle had learned how to fight. The Kenyan story also belongs to a wider African youth moment. Across the continent, populations are young, connected, ambitious, and frustrated. Governments speak of demographic dividends, but a dividend is not automatic. It requires jobs, education, housing, healthcare, fair institutions, and credible political participation. Without those, youth becomes not a dividend, but pressure. Kenya's Gen Z revolt was one expression of that pressure. This is why other governments watch carefully. If young people in Nairobi could read a finance bill, organize online, reject ethnic division, and storm parliament, Similar methods could appear elsewhere. The tactics are portable: explain the law, expose the politicians, use humor, fundraise digitally, live stream repression, refuse old opposition capture, and turn one policy into a broader moral challenge. The Kenyan revolt became a manual and a warning at the same time. But every country has its own conditions. Kenya's institutions, media space, civil society, tech culture, and political history shaped what happened. The lesson is not that every African youth protest will copy Kenya. The lesson is that governments can no longer assume that young populations will remain politically passive while carrying the costs of debt, unemployment, and corruption. The phone has become an organizing tool, a classroom, a camera, a witness, and sometimes a shield that does not stop bullets but does stop silence. The moral power of the Kenyan protests came from the gap between official language and lived reality. Officials spoke of fiscal responsibility. Protesters spoke of hunger. Officials spoke of development. Protesters spoke of corruption. Officials spoke of national obligation. Protesters spoke of elite theft. Officials spoke of order. Protesters spoke of dead friends. That gap is where legitimacy breaks. Modern governments often hide behind technical language when choices are painful. They say revenue mobilization, expenditure rationalization, fiscal consolidation, external obligations, and macroeconomic stability. Those phrases may describe real constraints. But when people cannot afford basic life, technical language sounds like evasion. It feels like the state has become fluent in the language of creditors and awkward in the language of citizens. The Gen Z revolt forced translation in the opposite direction. It translated budgets into bread, debt into taxes, corruption into rent, and police violence into names. That act of translation was revolutionary because it removed the protective fog around policy. Once citizens could see the bill clearly, they could see the system behind it. This is why the movement was so dangerous. It did not only protest a decision, it attacked the language that made the decision seem inevitable. The role of women in the protest movement deserves attention. Young women were organizers, medics, speakers, designers, live streamers, lawyers, fundraisers, and frontline protesters. They challenged not only state power, but also assumptions about who is allowed to be visible in political confrontation. Online, they used humor, beauty, anger, and style as political tools. In the streets, they faced the same tear gas and bullets as men. This mattered because Kenya's political class, like many others, is often patriarchal in tone and structure. Young women speaking bluntly to power unsettled the old culture of respectability. They did not always dress, speak, or behave the way older leaders expected activists to behave. That became part of their power. They refused the idea that seriousness requires imitating the style of old men. Women also carried the burden of mourning. Mothers, sisters, girlfriends, friends, and wives became part of the memory of those killed. Their grief made the state's language of order sound cold. A government can argue policy with protesters. It is harder to argue with a mother asking why her child was shot. A complete script must show that Gen Z was not a faceless crowd. It was gendered, emotional, creative, and socially complex. Its courage had many faces. The protests also exposed the weakness of formal youth representation. Governments often create youth offices, youth funds, youth conferences, and youth appointments. These structures can be useful, but they can also become symbolic containment. Young people are invited to speak in controlled rooms while major decisions are made elsewhere. The 2024 revolt rejected that arrangement. Gen Z did not ask for a youth representative to explain their pain to the president. They explained it themselves. They did not wait for a government youth council. They organized outside the official youth machinery. They did not accept being treated as a demographic category to be managed. They acted as citizens with direct claims on the state. This is a major shift. The state prefers organized intermediaries because intermediaries can be negotiated with. A minister can meet youth leaders. A president can announce a youth task force. A party can recruit youth representatives. But a network generation that refuses official channels is harder to domesticate. The challenge is what happens next. Permanent exclusion from institutions can limit long-term wins. But entering institutions too cheaply can neutralize the movement. The future may require new forms of representation that are accountable to the energy that created them. The Kenyan protests also challenged the myth that political knowledge belongs to experts. Budget specialists, economists, lawyers, and MPs often assume ordinary citizens cannot follow finance legislation. Gen Z proved otherwise. They did not become economists overnight, but they learned enough to ask sharp questions. That is democracy at its most basic. Citizens do not need to know everything to know when the state is taking from them unfairly. Expertise still matters. Public finance is complex. Debt management is complex. Tax policy involves trade-offs. But complexity should not be used as a shield against accountability. The role of experts in a democracy is to clarify, not to intimidate. When citizens feel excluded from technical decisions that shape their lives, they may reject the entire process. The finance bill became a popular education event because young people refused to be excluded. They turned complexity into shareable knowledge. They demanded that MPs defend the details. They showed that democratic participation can begin with a PDF and a phone. This is one of the most hopeful parts of the story. A protest against taxation became a protest for political literacy. It said, "We will read what you write. We will understand what you hide. And we will come for the vote." The economic background also includes the contradiction of Kenya's international image. Kenya is praised for fintech, mobile money, startups, logistics, tourism, diplomacy, renewable energy, and a dynamic private sector. Nairobi is often described as a hub of African innovation. But innovation does not automatically solve inequality. A country can have world-class digital systems and still have young people unable to afford rent. It can host international conferences and still have citizens asking why hospitals lack basics. This contradiction sharpened the revolt. Gen Z knew the language of innovation because they lived it. They used mobile money to fund protest logistics. They used digital platforms to organize. They used design tools to make posters. They used online spaces to educate. They were the very generation Kenya advertises as proof of its modern future. Yet they were protesting because that future felt stolen. That is what made the revolt so symbolically powerful. The tools of Kenya's modern brand became tools against the Kenyan state. Silicon Savannah met tear gas. The tech-savvy youth celebrated by development narratives became the youth accusing the development model of hypocrisy. A country cannot market its young people as innovation and then treat them as disposable when they innovate politically. One of the hardest questions is whether the protests changed the relationship between citizens and MPs. The movement tracked parliamentary votes and targeted representatives directly. This mattered because it challenged the habit of MPs hiding behind party discipline or national rhetoric. Young people wanted names. Who voted yes? Who defended the bill? Who ignored constituents? Who mocked protesters? Who disappeared when accountability was demanded? This personalization of accountability can change politics. It makes parliamentary behavior visible. It connects national policy to local representatives. It tells MPs that votes have reputational cost. In a democracy, that should be normal. But where patronage, party loyalty, and ethnic bloc politics dominate, direct issue-based accountability can be disruptive. The challenge is sustaining it beyond one bill. Will citizens keep tracking votes? Will they attend constituency meetings? Will they challenge MPs in primaries or elections? Will they build databases, scorecards, and local civic groups? If yes, the Gen Z revolt could become a new accountability culture. If no, the memory may fade until the next crisis. The finance bill showed what is possible when citizens read Parliament closely. The next step is making that scrutiny permanent. The protests also forced a debate about property destruction and legitimacy. When part of Parliament burned and other incidents of looting or damage were reported, the state used those images to delegitimize the movement. Protesters and supporters argued that the state focused on property to avoid discussing dead citizens and the causes of rage. This tension appears in almost every major uprising. Property destruction can weaken public support, invite repression, and create fear among people who might otherwise sympathize. It can also become a symbol of how deeply institutions have lost legitimacy. The moral question is difficult because a burning building is visible, but slow violence is often invisible. A tax system that crushes the poor, corruption that steals medicine, police bullets that kill protesters. These are also forms of destruction. A strong script should not romanticize chaos. But it should also refuse to let the state use broken windows to erase broken bodies. The storming of Parliament was dangerous and historic because it revealed a democracy in crisis. The response should not be to ask only why the crowd entered. It should also ask why so many citizens believed the building no longer represented them. Kenya's protest wave also revealed the central role of urban space. Nairobi's central business district, Parliament Road, Uhuru Highway, churches, universities, bus stages, and commercial streets became political terrain. Police roadblocks, water cannons, barricades, and tear gas turned familiar places into scenes of confrontation. The city became a map of power. Urban protest matters because capitals concentrate institutions. Parliament, ministries, courts, media, embassies, and financial centers are close enough to be pressured symbolically. When protesters fill the capital, they interrupt the image of normal governance. When businesses close, the economy feels the political crisis. When roads are blocked, the state sees control slipping. But urban protest also creates class tensions. Some residents fear disruption. Business owners fear looting. Workers may lose income when streets close. The state can exploit those fears by presenting protesters as enemies of order. Movements must therefore balance disruption with public legitimacy. The Gen Z revolt used Nairobi as a stage, but its significance spread beyond the capital. Protests in Mombasa and other towns showed the issue was national. Still, Parliament remained the central symbol because that is where the bill became law. The crowd went to the place where pain was being written into statute. The relationship between protest and music should not be ignored. Kenyan youth politics moved with sound. Chants, songs, remixes, viral audio, street rhythm, and cultural references that older politicians often could not decode. Music makes protest memorable. It gives courage. It turns fear into movement. It lets a crowd feel itself as one body. Digital culture amplified this. A chant in the street could become a clip. A clip could become a remix. A remix could become a mobilizing tool. Humor, rhythm, and anger fused. The protest became not only a political event, but a cultural event. That is part of why it spread so widely among young people. It felt like their language. Political power often underestimates culture because culture does not look like a formal organization. But culture can carry movements across class and region. A song can travel where a manifesto cannot. A joke can recruit where a speech fails. A remix can keep a slogan alive after a march ends. The Kenyan revolt had documents, lawyers, medics, and organizers. It also had vibe. In digital youth politics, vibe is not superficial. It is a mobilizing atmosphere. The government's communication strategy struggled because the old tone no longer worked. Officials who spoke down to young people were clipped and mocked. Explanations that might once have passed in press conferences were fact-checked in real time. Attempts to frame protesters as misled or manipulated often backfired because the movement took pride in understanding the bill. The state discovered that condescension is dangerous when the audience can reply instantly. This is a major change in political communication. In older broadcast politics, leaders spoke and citizens listened. In network politics, leaders speak and citizens remix, annotate, ridicule, and archive. A president's statement is not the final word. It is raw material. An MP's insult can become a week-long meme. A contradiction can be placed beside an old campaign clip within minutes. This does not mean online discourse is always fair or accurate. It can be brutal, misleading, and shallow, but it creates accountability in the realm of attention. Politicians who once relied on controlled messaging now face a public that edits them live. Kenya's Gen Z revolt showed that communication power had shifted. The state still had official channels. The youth had the feed. In a legitimacy crisis, the feed can move faster. The protests also exposed a deeper philosophical question about taxation. Taxes are the price of collective life when citizens believe the state is legitimate. They fund roads, schools, hospitals, security, courts, and public goods. A society cannot function without revenue. But taxation becomes morally unstable when citizens believe the state is predatory, wasteful, or corrupt. Kenya's Gen Z protesters were not simply saying all taxes are bad. Many were saying taxes must be justified. They wanted to know why essential goods were targeted, why waste was not cut first, why corruption was not recovered, why politicians did not reduce their own benefits, why debt had been accumulated, and why ordinary people should pay for decisions they did not trust. This is a democratic argument. A government that cannot explain taxation as fair loses legitimacy. A government that asks for sacrifice while displaying luxury invites revolt. A government that treats citizens as revenue sources rather than participants misunderstands the social contract. The finance bill failed politically because it could not answer the moral question behind taxation. Why should we pay more to a state that gives us less and steals what we already gave? The role of the Kenyan middle class was complicated. Some middle-class citizens supported the protest strongly, especially young professionals and students. Others feared instability, property damage, or economic disruption. Middle classes often occupy this ambivalent position in protest movements. They want accountability, but fear disorder. They resent corruption, but rely on stability. They criticize the state, but also fear what happens if the state loses control. Gen Z blurred some of these boundaries because economic precarity now reaches into educated groups. A degree no longer guarantees security. A professional identity does not guarantee income. Young middle-class Kenyans could see themselves slipping downward or blocked from adulthood. That made them more willing to confront the state. At the same time, the movement connected with poorer urban youth and informal workers facing harsher daily pressures. The shared target was not identical experience, but shared frustration with a political class seen as insulated from consequence. This cross-class energy gave the protests strength. But sustaining cross-class movements is difficult. Different groups may have different tolerance for risk, different demands, and different visions of change. The state can exploit those differences. A movement that begins with shared anger must eventually build shared strategy. The Kenyan state's use of security language is part of a wider global pattern. Governments facing protest often distinguish between peaceful demonstrators and criminals, looters, infiltrators, or foreign-backed agitators. Sometimes violence or criminal activity is real, but the language can also be used to delegitimize the whole movement and justify force. In Kenya, officials warned against chaos, property destruction, and criminal elements. Many citizens, remembering the deaths of 2024, heard those warnings as preparation for repression. Trust was already low. The state's promise to protect order did not reassure people who believed the state itself had killed protesters. This is how legitimacy collapses. Words that should be normal, law, order, security, begin to sound threatening. Police presence that should protect citizens becomes a sign of danger. A government warning that it will enforce the law can be heard as a warning that it will repeat violence. The anniversary protests revealed this broken trust. The state saw risk in the crowd. The crowd saw risk in the state. Between those two fears, democracy becomes fragile. Rebuilding trust would require more than restraint on one day. It would require accountability for the days when restraint failed. The finance bill protests also raise questions about Kenya's development model. Infrastructure projects can be important. Roads, railways, energy, ports, and digital systems can support growth. But when development is debt-financed, expensive, poorly explained, or associated with corruption, citizens begin to ask who development is for. A railway can become a symbol of progress or a symbol of debt. A road can become a public good or a campaign trophy. A project can serve the economy or enrich contractors. Young Kenyans looked at the cost of living and asked why development had not produced security for them. If the economy is growing, why are jobs scarce? If infrastructure is expanding, why are taxes rising? If leaders celebrate progress, why do ordinary people feel squeezed? These questions are not anti-development. They are demands for honest development. A country cannot build its way out of mistrust if every project is suspected of corruption. Development requires legitimacy. Citizens must believe that sacrifice today produces shared benefit tomorrow. In Kenya, that belief has been weakened. The Gen Z revolt was therefore also a demand to audit the development story. Not only what was built, but who paid, who profited, and who was left out. The legal community played a critical role during and after the protests. Lawyers offered support for arrested demonstrators, challenged illegal detention, documented abuses, and reminded the state that protest is protected by constitutional rights. This mattered because movements need more than emotion. They need legal defense. The state can use arrests to exhaust protesters financially and psychologically. Legal networks reduce that cost. Kenya's constitution, adopted in 2010, contains strong rights language born from earlier struggles for reform. The Gen Z movement implicitly tested whether those constitutional promises were real. Can citizens assemble? Can they criticize leaders? Can they protest taxes? Can police be held accountable? Can courts protect rights in moments of pressure? A constitution is only as strong as its enforcement under stress. The finance bill protests created stress. They forced institutions to reveal whether they would protect citizens or protect power. The involvement of lawyers also connected the movement to Kenya's longer reform tradition. Gen Z may have used new tools, but it stood on legal foundations built by earlier activists, judges, journalists, and reformers. Every generation inherits tools from the last, even when it rejects the last generation's politics. The memory of those killed may become the emotional foundation of future activism. Movements need symbols, and martyrs are among the most powerful. But martyrdom is painful because it turns private grief into public politics. Families may want justice, not symbolism. Activists may speak names to sustain memory. Politicians may appear at memorials. The state may offer compensation. Media may return on anniversaries. The dead become part of the national argument. This must be handled with care. The dead should not be used casually by any side. Their stories matter as human lives first. Who were they? What did they hope for? Why were they there? What did their families lose? What future was taken? A documentary should name the wound without turning grief into decoration. The movement's moral seriousness depends on remembering that protest is not only spectacle. It has costs. A family that loses a child does not experience the uprising as content. It experiences absence. That absence is why accountability matters. Without justice, the state asks families to accept that their loved ones were the price of order. No democracy should ask that. The Kenyan revolt also showed that young people are no longer satisfied with being told to wait. Wait for elections. Wait for development. Wait for jobs. Wait for leaders to mature. Wait for the economy to grow. Wait for debt to stabilize. Wait for your turn. Waiting is often the language power uses when it has no answer. Gen Z's refusal was partly a refusal of waiting. They wanted accountability now. They wanted the bill stopped now. They wanted MPs named now. They wanted the president to respond now. The speed of digital life intensified this impatience. When information moves instantly, slow political responsiveness feels like contempt. But democracy also requires patience. Building institutions, contesting elections, reforming police, changing budgets, and reducing debt take time. The challenge for Gen Z is to combine urgency with endurance. The challenge for the state is to stop using patience as an excuse for inaction. A generation can be impatient and still be right. Sometimes impatience is the only force that breaks a system's comfort. The question is how to transform impatience into durable change without losing the fire that made change possible. The protest movement also had a Pan-African digital echo. Young people in Nigeria, Uganda, Ghana, South Africa, and elsewhere watched Kenya and connected it to their own frustrations. Memories of Nigeria's EndSARS protests were especially relevant. Youth-led, digitally organized, anti-police brutality met with state violence and transformed into a broader critique of governance. Kenya's protests entered that lineage. These movements learn from each other. They borrow tactics, hashtags, visual styles, safety protocols, fundraising methods, and emotional language. Governments also learn from each other. Internet restrictions, police deployments, infiltration claims, public order rhetoric, and selective concessions. The continent is becoming a shared laboratory of youth protest and state response. Kenya's Gen Z revolt therefore matters beyond Kenya. It is part of a wider struggle over whether young Africans can force accountability from states that often invoke development while protecting elites. It asks whether digital power can overcome patronage politics. It asks whether leaderless movements can survive repression. It asks whether police violence will end movements or radicalize them. The answer is not yet known. But Kenya added a new chapter to the continent's protest memory. One of the most cinematic elements of the Kenya story is the contrast between inside and outside parliament. Inside, suits, microphones, procedure, votes, party discipline, and the formal language of law. Outside, chants, smoke, running feet, phones held high, medics, fear, anger, and bodies pressed against police lines. Democracy is supposed to connect those two spaces. On June 25th, it failed. When the outside enters the inside by force, the system has already broken in some way. That does not mean the breach is simple or purely heroic, but it does mean representation has lost credibility. People do not storm Parliament because they feel well represented by it. They storm it because the distance between lawmaking and life has become intolerable. This image should be used carefully in the script. It is the central visual, but the voiceover must not linger only on fire. It must ask what burned before the building burned. Trust, patience, legitimacy, and the belief that voting every 5 years is enough when survival is being taxed every day. The building can be repaired. The trust is harder. The question of violence within protest movements is difficult. Most protesters may intend peaceful action, but large crowds can become chaotic, especially under police pressure. Infiltrators may appear. Opportunistic looting may occur. Anger may overflow. The state may use isolated incidents to justify broad repression. The movement may deny too much and lose credibility with people who fear disorder. A serious script must acknowledge this complexity without adopting the state's framing wholesale. It should say, yes, unrest occurred. Yes, property was damaged. Yes, the storming of Parliament was a dramatic escalation. But it should also ask why the state's response was lethal and whether the focus on property became a way to avoid accountability for deaths. This balance matters because the audience needs trust. If the script romanticizes everything, it becomes propaganda. If it criminalizes the movement, it becomes state language. The truth is more powerful. An overwhelmingly civic youth movement entered a dangerous phase under conditions of anger, distrust, and police violence. The state then used force that left a lasting national wound. That is more complicated. It is also more honest. The role of memory in Kenyan politics is central. Kenya has lived through political violence before. Colonial emergency, post-independence repression, the struggle for multi-party democracy, the 2007 to 2008 post-election violence, police killings, and repeated protest crackdowns. Each episode leaves traces. Citizens learn what the state can do. The state learns what citizens will tolerate. Sometimes reforms follow. Sometimes impunity teaches the wrong lesson. The Gen Z revolt entered this archive. It did not erase older struggles. It added a new one. Its distinctiveness was generational and digital, but its confrontation with police power was part of a longer Kenyan pattern. That continuity should be clear in the script. The youth may have used new tools, but the state's coercive reflex was old. A country becomes democratic not only by holding elections, but by changing how it treats dissent between elections. Kenya's constitution promises rights. The protests tested those promises in the street. The result was mixed at best. Civic courage on one side, deadly force on the other, and a state still struggling to accept that protest is not treason. The struggle for democracy is not only at the ballot box. It is at the barricade, the courtroom, the morgue, and the anniversary march. The economic story after the bill's withdrawal remains unresolved. A government can withdraw taxes, but the budget gap remains. Debt does not disappear because protesters win. Public services still require funding. Development still costs money. Salaries must be paid. The fiscal pressure that produced the bill still exists. This is the government's strongest argument, and the script should not ignore it. Kenya needs revenue. All states do. The problem is legitimacy and fairness. If the state needs money, it must explain why, cut waste, fight corruption credibly, protect the poorest, tax wealth more fairly, and show citizens that sacrifice is shared. Without that, every new revenue measure will be seen as predation. The Gen Z movement therefore forced a more difficult conversation. It is not enough to reject a bill. What is the alternative fiscal plan? How should Kenya manage debt? What should be cut? Who should pay more? How should stolen money be recovered? What public goods deserve funding? These questions are hard. But democratic politics is supposed to ask hard questions openly. The revolt defeated one bill. The deeper challenge is building a budget people can believe in. The script's final act should return to 2026 because the anniversary gives the story present tense. Without the anniversary, the 2024 protests might feel like history. With the anniversary, they become unfinished. Families still demand justice. Police still prepare for unrest. Businesses still close in fear. Government still warns against chaos. Youth still remember. The dead still have names. This creates a strong ending structure. Begin with June 25th, 2024, when Parliament burned. End with June 25th, 2026, when the state tried to manage memory. The movement's first battle was against a bill. Its later battle is against forgetting. For a documentary, that is powerful. Fire is cinematic, but memory is deeper. The audience should finish with the sense that Kenya's Gen Z revolt did not end when Ruto withdrew the finance bill. It changed the relationship between youth and power. It created an anniversary the state cannot ignore. It made Parliament a symbol not only of lawmaking, but of betrayal and blood. The final line should land there. The bill was withdrawn. The debt remained. The dead remained. And so did the generation that had learned the road to Parliament. The question of political trust sits beneath every part of the Kenya story. Trust is not built by slogans. It is built when citizens believe leaders tell the truth, spend money carefully, punish theft, and share sacrifice. Once trust breaks, even reasonable policy becomes suspect. A tax that might be accepted in a trusted system becomes an insult in a distrusted one. This is why the finance bill became explosive. The government framed it as necessary revenue. Young people framed it as theft by another name. The difference was not only economics. It was trust. Citizens looked at corruption scandals, expensive political lifestyles, public debt, and weak services, then asked why the state deserved more. That is a dangerous question for any government. When citizens stop trusting the budget, they stop trusting the state's story about itself. Every number becomes suspicious. Every promise becomes strategy. Every demand becomes extraction. A democracy can survive disagreement. It cannot survive indefinitely if a generation believes the state is a machine designed to take from them and protect itself. The Gen Z revolt was, at its deepest level, a revolt against that belief becoming permanent. The Kenyan protests also revealed how quickly political legitimacy can move from institutions to networks. Parliament had the formal power to pass the bill. The youth network had the moral power to delegitimize it. That split is crucial. A law can be legal and still be experienced as illegitimate. A vote can be procedural and still ignite revolt. Modern states often confuse legality with consent. They say Parliament passed it. They say procedure was followed. They say institutions worked. But when citizens believe the institutions no longer represent them, procedure is not enough. The law begins to look like violence in slow motion, written politely before it is enforced aggressively. This is why the breach of Parliament carried such symbolic force. Protesters were saying the distance between formal legality and public legitimacy had become unbearable. They did not trust the building to speak for them, so they went to the building. That is not a healthy state of democracy. It is a warning sign. But the warning was not only about the crowd. It was about the institution that had lost the crowd before the first barrier fell. The role of parents and older generations in the revolt was emotionally complex. Some parents feared for their children and begged them to stay home. Others supported them, sent money, shared safety advice, or watched live streams in terror. Some older Kenyans saw in Gen Z a courage they admired. Others worried the young were reckless. The phrase, "we are not our parents," could sound like accusation, but it also carried inheritance. Older generations had fought their own battles against one-party rule, detention without trial, corruption, political violence, and constitutional manipulation. They knew what the state could do. Their caution came from memory, not weakness. Gen Z's defiance came from a different relationship to fear, shaped by digital visibility and economic hopelessness. The movement's power came partly from this generational tension. Young people were not simply repeating their parents' politics. They were taking old grievances and speaking them in new language. The demand for accountability did not begin in 2024, but in 2024 it moved with a new speed, a new humor, and a new refusal of deference. Every generation says the next is too loud. Sometimes the next generation is loud because quiet failed. The protest also forced Kenya to confront the emotional economy of respect. In many societies, young people are expected to respect elders, leaders, clergy, teachers, chiefs, and officials. That respect can hold communities together. It can also protect power from scrutiny. Politicians often benefit when criticism is framed as disrespect. Gen Z broke that rule. They spoke to MPs with direct anger. They mocked leaders by name. They refused the performance of politeness. Older observers sometimes found the tone offensive, but the young were making a point. Respect cannot be demanded by people who do not respect citizens' lives. This is a major cultural shift. When a government loses the automatic respect of youth, it must earn legitimacy differently. Titles no longer protect. Age no longer silences. Office no longer guarantees deference. Every speech can be clipped. Every contradiction can be archived. Every insult can become fuel. The revolt was therefore not only political, but cultural. It changed the acceptable tone of citizenship. It said power can be addressed directly, even rudely, when power has become rude to the public through policy, corruption, and violence. The story of Kenya's Gen Z revolt also belongs to the history of public mourning. Mourning is political when the state is accused of causing death. A candle, a flower, a name, a photograph, a march, or a wreath becomes an accusation. It says the dead are not statistics. It says the state cannot close the file. It says memory will gather where justice has not. The 2026 anniversary marches were powerful because they transformed the protest calendar into a memorial calendar. That matters for long-term movements. A protest can be dispersed by police. A memorial is harder to attack without appearing cruel. A government can argue with activists. It is harder to argue with bereaved families. But states still try to manage mourning. They regulate routes. They block roads. They warn against chaos. They place barriers around symbolic spaces. They fear that grief can become mobilization, because it can. Public grief can turn a past event into a present demand. The families of those killed carry the movement in a way no hashtag can. They are the reason the story cannot end with the bill's withdrawal. They remind the country that policy became blood, and blood demands more than a press release. The relationship between Kenya's protests and media freedom also matters. Journalists, photographers, live streamers, and citizen reporters documented events in real time. Their work shaped local and international understanding of the protests. Without images, the state can control narrative more easily. With images, every use of force becomes harder to deny. But documentation carries risk. Journalists can be harassed, injured, arrested, or accused of incitement. Citizen reporters can be targeted. Live streamers can unintentionally expose protesters to surveillance. The camera is both shield and vulnerability. The Gen Z revolt blurred the line between journalist and participant. A protester with a phone became a witness. A viewer became a distributor. A clip became evidence, propaganda, memory, or all three. This is the new media environment of protest: decentralized, immediate, emotional, and legally complicated. For the script, this matters because the movement was not only organized through media, it was preserved through media. The reason the state could not fully control the story is that the story had too many cameras. The streets were watching themselves. Kenya's uprising also reflected a crisis of aspiration. Young people are not only angry when they are poor, they are angry when they are promised a future and then asked to pay for its disappearance. Education promises mobility. Technology promises opportunity. Political campaigns promise empowerment. The market promises that hustle will be rewarded. But when effort does not produce security, aspiration becomes rage. This is the emotional engine behind many youth revolts. The young are not demanding luxury. They are demanding that life become possible. Rent, transport, data, food, healthcare, school fees, business licenses, taxes, and police harassment all become barriers to adulthood. A generation remains suspended, old enough to be taxed, too excluded to be secure. The finance bill touched this wound directly. It said, in effect, the state needs more from you. The youth answered, we have already given time, education, labor, patience, and hope. What more do you want? A country that cannot convert youth aspiration into opportunity eventually faces youth anger. Kenya's Gen Z revolt was that anger becoming organized enough to be heard. The role of the Kenyan diaspora was also important. Kenyans abroad followed the protests, amplified messages, sent money, pressured embassies, and shaped international visibility. Diasporas often become political amplifiers because they live outside the immediate reach of local police, but remain emotionally tied to home. They can speak loudly, lobby foreign institutions, and help fund legal or medical support. At the same time, diaspora politics can be complicated. People abroad may push for confrontation while those at home face the bullets. They may have different class positions, different risk tolerance, and different timelines. But in the Kenyan case, diaspora attention helped internationalize the movement and keep pressure on the government. This is another feature of modern protest. A national movement no longer stays fully national. Families, workers, students, and professionals abroad become part of the information network. The state must manage not only domestic opinion, but global Kenyan opinion. The internet makes exile less silent. It allows people outside the country to remain inside the political conversation. That can strengthen movements. But it also means the movement's audience is never only the crowd in the street. The courts will likely remain a central arena for the movement's demands. Protest cases, police accountability claims, constitutional challenges, compensation disputes, and freedom of assembly questions all move into the legal system after the streets clear. This is where revolts often become quieter, but not less important. A judge's ruling can preserve memory as law. A failed prosecution can deepen cynicism. A constitutional petition can transform anger into precedent. The Kenyan judiciary has, at times, shown independence, but it also operates under political pressure. The Gen Z revolt will test whether courts can protect rights after a major confrontation with the executive and security forces. If courts deliver accountability, they can restore some trust. If they fail, the lesson to young people may be that institutions protect themselves first. Legal aftermath is slow. It does not trend like a burning parliament, but it matters. Movements that win in the street can still lose in court if evidence disappears, cases drag, witnesses fear retaliation, and the public moves on. That is why documentation, legal aid, and civic pressure after the protest are essential. The revolution may be live-streamed. Justice is filed in paperwork. Kenya's revolt also asks what patriotism means. The government may frame itself as defender of national stability. Protesters frame themselves as defenders of the nation against predatory leadership. Both claim Kenya. That is common in political crises. The question is whose patriotism expands citizenship and whose patriotism protects power. Gen Z's patriotism was visible in flags, chants, names, and the insistence that taxes and budgets belong to the public. They were not rejecting Kenya. They were rejecting the idea that loving Kenya means obeying leaders quietly. Their nationalism was not about ethnic supremacy or party loyalty. It was about ownership of the state. This matters because governments often accuse protesters of damaging the country's image. But a country's image is not more important than its citizens. If the image requires silence about corruption, police killings, and economic pain, then the image is a mask. A mature patriotism can criticize the state because it believes the country deserves better. Kenya's Gen Z revolt was patriotic in that sense. It said the country is not the politicians, not the bill, not the police line, not the debt schedule. The country is the people being asked to pay. The long-term risk for the movement is exhaustion. States often survive protest waves by waiting. They make concessions, arrest selectively, open dialogue, divide activists, exploit scandals, let fear spread, and trust that ordinary life will reclaim people's time. Rent must be paid. Exams must be taken. Jobs must be found. Families must be fed. Movements run on energy, and energy is expensive. Gen Z's network structure helps resist this, but it does not eliminate fatigue. Sustained politics requires routines, funding, leadership, trust, and victories. Without those, even powerful movements can become memories before they become institutions. The state knows this. That is why anniversaries matter so much. They interrupt fatigue. They bring the story back. They tell people that what happened was not a phase. But anniversaries alone cannot build power. They must connect to campaigns, police accountability, budget transparency, vote tracking, civic education, voter registration, local organizing, and candidate recruitment. A revolt becomes history if it is remembered. It becomes transformation if it is organized. One of the most important questions after the revolt is whether Kenya's youth will enter electoral politics differently. Protest can stop a bill, but elections decide who writes the next one. If Gen Z remains outside formal politics entirely, It may keep moral purity, but lose legislative power. If it enters politics without safeguards, it may be absorbed by the same patronage systems it condemned. The path forward may involve independent candidates, issue-based coalitions, youth-led civic scorecards, local government pressure, and public tracking of representatives. It may not require one national party immediately. It may begin with constituencies. Who voted for the bill? Who supported police accountability? Who discloses spending? Who attends public meetings? Who responds to constituents? The old political system survives because it is local as well as national. It reaches churches, funerals, fundraisers, ethnic associations, business networks, and county structures. Gen Z's digital power must eventually meet that ground game. Otherwise, the old system can retreat from the feed and survive in the ward. The streetship parliament. The ballot must decide whether parliament changes. The Kenya script should also make space for ambiguity around Ruto himself. A weak script turns him into a cartoon villain. A strong one shows the contradiction. Ruto inherited fiscal pressures and debt problems that were not entirely of his making. Kenya did need revenue. The state faced real budget constraints. But leadership is judged by choices, priorities, tone, and trust. Ruto's government failed to convince young Kenyans that sacrifice was fair, shared, and necessary. His hustler image made the backlash sharper. A leader who campaigns as champion of ordinary strivers is judged harshly when ordinary strivers feel taxed and dismissed. The problem was not only the bill. It was the betrayal of the brand. Politics often punishes leaders most when they violate the identity that brought them to power. Ruto's later withdrawal of the bill showed responsiveness under pressure, but the deaths and repression damaged the possibility of an easy reset. Dialogue after violence is difficult. Citizens hear every invitation through the memory of force. A balanced script can say, Kenya's fiscal problems are real. Ruto's political failure was also real. The revolt happened where those truths collided.